Don't move. Don't speak. You think your uniform means anything out here? The officer's voice came out low, sharp, and full of a kind of practiced dominance that did not come from fear, but habit. His hand pressed the side of the car door as if the entire situation was already decided, as if whatever happened next was something he believed he had the right to control. The woman behind the wheel did not flinch. She did not raise her voice or defend herself. She simply looked back at him with a calm, steady gaze that most people never learn unless they have stood on a battlefield where breathing wrong could end a life. Her voice was even when she spoke. I have served this country longer than you have carried a badge. I know what real danger looks like, and I know this is not it. But the officer didn't hear her. He did not want to hear her. He only wanted compliance. What neither of them knew was that in less than 20 seconds, a bystander would lift a phone. A video would start recording, and millions of people, across cities and states, would soon replay this moment frame by frame, arguing, judging, choosing sides. Before we begin the full story you are watching, please consider subscribing to the channel, and if you feel moved by what unfolds, leave a like to support awareness and understanding. Now, let us truly begin. Nadia Jenkins had returned to Chicago after 12 long years in war zones, and those years carried weight. She had seen sunrises through dust clouds in Mosul, heard the last breaths of someone she had promised to protect, and learned to steady her hands even when her heart was breaking. The military had shaped her into something disciplined, focused, and precise. But it had not taught her how to come home, how to be ordinary again, how to walk into the same streets where she once played tag as a girl and now feel the distance between who she had been and who she had become. The South Side had changed and stayed the same all at once. Corner stores had new paint, sidewalks had new cracks, and faces she remembered had grown older, softer, or harder. The city didn't welcome her with celebration. It didn't know what she had done. It didn't ask. Home isn't always warm. Sometimes home is just familiar. When she walked through Aunt Keisha's doorway, the smell of lemon cleaning oil and old family photos on the wall hit her all at once. Keisha was smaller now, the illness having taken piece after piece of her strength. But her eyes, those eyes were still bright, full of recognition and love that no disease could dim. "There's my soldier," she whispered, her voice thin but warm, her hand lifting slowly to touch Nadia's cheek. It had been over a decade since someone had touched her with gentleness. Nadia knelt, placed her forehead against her aunt's shoulder, and let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding for years. Uncle Jamal watched from the kitchen doorway, leaning on the frame like he needed it to stay upright. He had grown older, lines deeper across his face, the years of factory work carved into his joints, but his eyes still held the quiet steadiness of a man who had seen life's storms and learned how to keep standing through them. "You came home," he said simply, not as praise, not as question, but as fact. That evening, the TV murmured in the background, playing a local news segment about police complaints rising again in certain neighborhoods, about promises of reform that hadn't changed the numbers, about families who spoke into microphones with tired voices asking why they had to keep asking. Nadia listened, quiet, her hands resting still on her thighs. She understood authority. She understood power. She understood how both could be used well and misused easily. But she said nothing. She was home to care for her aunt, not to fight, not to confront. But war does not only happen in foreign countries. Sometimes war happens in the place that raised you. Later, lying in her childhood bedroom, on the same mattress she once dreamed of escaping from, memories came, not as stories she told others, but as night sounds only she could hear. The muffled shout of a corpsman trying to stop the bleeding, the rattle of a breath that would not return. A voice calling her name and fading, fading, fading. She pressed her palms over her eyes, willing the memory back into the place she kept it locked away. She had survived what others did not, and survival does not feel like victory. It feels like responsibility. In the morning. She moved quietly. She made tea for her aunt. She changed bedding. She laughed gently with Jamal about the old neighbors and the new gossip of the block. The warmth was real. The love was real. And yet, something in her chest stayed tight, as though she knew the world outside their door had not changed just because she had. When she grabbed her keys to pick up medication and groceries, her aunt squeezed her hand lightly. "Don't let this city take more from you," she said. It was not a warning. It was love in the form of caution. Nadia nodded. But the city didn't need to take anything. It just needed a moment, and that moment was waiting just a few blocks away. Where a police cruiser would spot a car, it decided looked out of place. Driven by a woman they could not read, carrying a strength they did not expect. A stop that should have lasted 2 minutes would become a flashpoint, and the wind of the city would begin to shift. The morning was quiet when Nadia pulled her Ford Explorer onto 63rd Street. The kind of quiet that comes before something shifts, before a moment sets itself into memory. She was thinking about the list in her pocket, the medication her aunt needed, the groceries for dinner, the way small routines sometimes help hold heavy lives together. She was not thinking about danger. She was not thinking about conflict. She had survived too much to imagine harm would find her on a simple errand. But fate does not move with fairness. It moves with timing. A patrol car slipped behind her at the intersection. First just another vehicle in traffic, then slowing, then following. The lights flicked on with a single sharp flash of red and blue. Nadia exhaled once, steady and slow, pulled to the curb, and placed both hands openly on the steering wheel. She was calm. She had done nothing wrong, but calm does not stop perception. Officer Ryan Caldwell stepped out of the cruiser, shoulders squared, jaw tight. The kind of posture that suggested anger carried from another place, another time, another life that had very little to do with the person sitting in front of him now. He had seen things too. Though not like she had, his wounds were different. Frustration at a crumbling marriage. Disappointment in a career that once promised purpose but became routine. Resentment at a neighborhood that did not fear him the way he wanted. His partner, Officer Sofia Ramirez, stepped out a moment later, newer to the job, eyes sharp with worry, trying to learn how to follow orders in a world that expected her to choose loyalty over judgment. Caldwell tapped the back of Nadia's vehicle, walking slowly toward her window with a swagger that said he already believed he knew how this encounter would go. "License and registration," he said curtly. Nadia provided both without hesitation. She moved with deliberate slowness, every gesture open, every motion visible. This was not fear. This was experience. People who have faced death learn to move like this, present, controlled, aware. Caldwell glanced at her ID, then at her, then back again. "This plate is blurry," he said, "like announcing a verdict." Nadia knew the excuse. So did every person who had lived on these blocks long enough. "Officer," she said evenly, "my vehicle passed inspection 2 months ago. The plate is clean." Caldwell's eyes narrowed. He wasn't listening. He wasn't here for answers. He wanted obedience. Step out of the vehicle. Nadia remained still, not rigid, not defiant, just still. "I am not refusing," she said. "I am asking why I am being ordered out of my vehicle." Caldwell smirked. "You don't get to ask questions here." The tone struck something deep inside her. A memory of being in another country, at another checkpoint, watching a man with a rifle speak to civilians the way Caldwell spoke to her now. Different uniform. Same hunger for control. Ramirez shifted slightly, uneasy. She wasn't blind. She saw demeanor. She saw composure. She saw something in Nadia that didn't match the stereotype Caldwell was reacting to. But rookies learn early. Silence is safer than stepping in. "I am a United States Navy service member," Nadia said quietly. "Here is my identification." Caldwell barely looked at it. "SEAL?" he scoffed, voice thick with disbelief. "From Englewood? Pull the other one." Nadia didn't respond. She didn't need to justify her existence. But his words did something unexpected. They cracked open a memory she thought she had buried. A doorway blown open in Mosul. The dust, the scream, the blood on her hands, the sound of her own heartbeat echoing like a drum in a tomb. PTSD does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes in silence, a flicker behind the eyes, a pause in breath. Caldwell misread the stillness as disrespect. "Get out of the car," he repeated, louder now, one hand already reaching for the handle. Ramirez took a step closer, unsure, but ready to follow whatever came next. And that moment, the instant before movement, that is where everything changed. Caldwell yanked the door, expecting resistance, expecting struggle, expecting a fight he had already built in his mind. But Nadia did not fight him. She did not strike. She simply moved. A shift of weight, a pivot of wrist, a controlled escape maneuver drilled into her bones through years of training where hesitation meant death. She redirected his grab, stepped out, and his own momentum carried him off balance. He stumbled sideways, boots scraping pavement, nearly falling into the street. People saw. They always do. A boy named Devin, standing outside a corner store, recognized her from a framed picture in his uncle's barber shop. The neighborhood girl who made it out, who became something rare, something honorable. His eyes widened. "Yo, that's Jenkins," he whispered, pulling his phone up, recording. Across the street, Tiana Brooks, known for filming fights and funny block moments for TikTok, saw the tension and hit record too. Life changes in seconds. All it takes is a lens. Caldwell regained his footing. Face burning with a humiliation he didn't have space to understand. To him. Her movement felt like disrespect, like challenge, like threat. He grabbed for her again. Nadia lifted her hands, palms visible, voice controlled. "I am not resisting." But control is meaningless to someone who has already decided who you are. Ramirez's breath was shallow now. She was watching a situation move towards something she couldn't name but felt. The street was watching too. Cars slowed, heads turned, and in the middle of it all, Nadia stood still, hands raised. A woman who had survived war only to return to a country that still questioned her right to exist without apology. The wind shifted, not in the weather, but in the tone of the moment. Something had begun, and it would not stay quiet. Caldwell's face flushed red as he regained his footing, a boiling mix of embarrassment and anger rising in him faster than reason could catch. To him, Nadia's movement had not been a trained defensive response. He saw it as humiliation, disrespect, a challenge to his authority in front of witnesses, and a man like him did not tolerate being seen as powerless. "So that's how it is," he growled, stepping forward again, voice louder, harsher, forcing the moment to become something bigger than it needed to be. Nadia stood still, hands raised in clear view, calm but focused, her breathing steady like she had trained herself to do in firefights where panic could cost lives. "Officer, I have not resisted," she said, her tone level, even, controlled. "I am following your directions. You are escalating without cause." The words were not sharp. They were simply the truth. But truth, spoken in calmness to a man who believes he is losing control, can feel like an insult. Ramirez's eyes flicked between them, uncertainty tightening her chest. She could see the difference in Nadia's posture. in the way she moved not with fear, but with discipline. Something about her was familiar. Though they had never met, it was the kind of stillness soldiers carry home from war. Too steady, too quiet, too heavy to be mistaken for defiance. "Caldwell," Ramirez said gently, hoping to soften the moment. But he didn't hear her. Not really. His ears were full of his own pride. Tiana's phone was already up, recording from across the street, her voice low as she narrated without trying to. She didn't touch him. She whispered into the mic. He pulled the door. She just moved. "Look at how he's acting now." Devin, still filming, stepped closer. Not enough to interfere, but enough to see clearly. He could feel the tension like static in the air. Others began to slow their pace, drawn toward the scene the way people are drawn to the edge of unfolding conflict, unsure if they should step in or stay back. Carlos Mendoza, who had just come from the hardware store, stopped at the curb and raised his voice without hesitation. "She ain't fighting you. Don't put your hands on her like that." His tone was protective, outrage rising from a place deep in the bones of people who have seen this too many times, over too many years, on too many corners just like this one. Caldwell snapped his head toward him. "Mind your business." But the street had already claimed the moment. The street was now part of this. Nadia kept her hands open, palms forward, shoulders relaxed, every muscle controlled with precise intention. She had learned long ago that the body can speak louder than the voice, and her body was saying, "I am not a threat." But Caldwell did not see what was in front of him. He saw only what he feared might be said about him later, that he was the one who lost control. And so he charged forward again, reaching for her wrist, trying to force compliance, but Nadia had trained for years to read movement, weight shifts, breathing rhythms. She stepped back just enough that he overextended again. Not an attack, a survival instinct, a practiced defense. Caldwell stumbled, his boots skidding across pavement, and his hand struck the side of her door. Gasps rippled through the small crowd now gathering. Someone murmured, "Man, this ain't right." Someone else whispered, "She's trained. Look how she's standing." Caldwell lunged again, this time grabbing her jacket, and in that split second, just one breath of time, Nadia saw two realities at once, in one. She did nothing and allowed him to drag her down, pin her, arrest her, and let this become another quiet injustice lost to paperwork. In the other, she relied on what she had learned to stay alive in rooms far from here, and the past came back like a flash of sand and shouts and the echo of gunfire, her teammate's hand in hers, his voice fading, the moment she had sworn she would never freeze again. Her muscles moved before thought. Not a strike, not an attack, a trained disengagement. She pivoted her hips, redirected his momentum, and stepped aside. Caldwell once again lost balance, and this time went down hard, his knee hitting pavement with a sharp crack of impact. Ramirez gasped. Tiana whispered, "Oh my God, she didn't even touch him. He did that to himself." Carlos shouted again, louder now, "She ain't resisting. Everybody can see that." Caldwell's face twisted as he rose, pain mixing with humiliation, and humiliation turning into something dangerous. His hand moved toward his belt, hovering near his taser, maybe his gun, maybe even he didn't know yet, and the moment held its breath. Ramirez stepped forward fast, voice shaking. "Caldwell, stop, just stop. She's not a threat." But her words were small against the storm building in him. Nadia did not run. She did not fight. She spoke instead, her voice low, steady, and meant only for him. "You are making a mistake. I am not your enemy, but to a man drowning in his own pride, a lifeline can feel like a challenge." Tiana's camera caught his face, every flicker of anger, every misinterpretation, every choice stacking toward what would come next. Devin whispered, "This is about to go bad." The street held its breath. And then, like a shift in the wind that signals a coming storm, a voice rang out from behind them, firm, authoritative, unmistakably commanding. That's enough. Sergeant Malik Washington had arrived. The moment was not over, but it had changed. Sergeant Malik Washington stepped forward with the presence of a man who did not need to shout to be heard, his voice cutting clean through the tension as though the air itself acknowledged authority when it recognized the real thing. "Caldwell," he said, steady and controlled. "Step back." It was not a suggestion. It was an order. Caldwell froze, jaw locked, the taste of humiliation still fresh and raw, but something in Malik's tone forced him to stop moving, even if he hated the feeling of stopping. Ramirez took a small breath of relief, one she had been holding in her chest since the moment everything began to spiral. Nadia remained still, hands visible, shoulders relaxed. The calm she maintained, not born of peace but discipline, learned over years where hesitation meant death. Malik turned to her, eyes steady, respectful, deliberate. "Ma'am," he said, using the word with intention, not sarcasm, not politeness, but recognition. "Do you have military identification?" Nadia answered simply, with no edge in her voice. "Yes, Sergeant. In my back pocket. I will retrieve it slowly." "Go ahead," he said, watching both her hands and Caldwell's clenched jaw at the same time. She moved with careful clarity, produced the ID, held it out. Malik took it, examined it, and nodded once. The smallest movement, but one with weight. He had seen men and women with that look before, that posture, that stillness that comes from knowing exactly how to survive the worst moments life can offer. Caldwell huffed, desperate to reclaim the scene. She resisted. "She put her hands on me." Malik didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I saw what happened," he said, "and we have body cams to review. The footage will confirm." His tone made it clear that lying would earn consequences. "Not cover." Caldwell opened his mouth, but Ramirez spoke first, the words tumbling out because silence now felt like complicity. "She didn't hit you. Ryan." She redirected. "You pulled the door first. We escalated." The admission landed like a stone dropped in still water. Caldwell turned toward her, disbelief and anger mixing, but Malik stepped between them. "Officer Ramirez," Malik said calmly, "activate your body cam and state your account clearly." Ramirez hesitated only a second, then clicked her cam. Her voice trembled at first, but sincerity steadied it. At 09:17 hours, traffic stop was initiated for a claimed blurry plate. The subject complied with requests for identification, no aggressive behavior. Officer Caldwell escalated verbal tone. Subject engaged in defensive maneuver when Officer Caldwell attempted physical removal without clear cause. Caldwell's face went rigid, the kind of rigid that comes from feeling exposed. Malik turned to him. "Now you—" Caldwell activated his cam with a jerk, but before he spoke, Malik's next words made the intention unmistakable. "And be sure your statement aligns with the footage." There was no threat. There was accountability. Caldwell's jaw worked, but no excuse formed into something he could say aloud. Tiana, still recording from across the street, whispered into her phone. "He's caught. They're actually caught. Look how fast everything changed when someone with sense showed up." Devin nodded, his voice quieter, carrying a mix of awe and relief. "That's a real sergeant. You can tell." Carlos folded his arms, watching carefully. The neighborhood had seen too many scenes like this end differently. Malik turned back to Nadia. "Ma'am, I need to verify your status with the Department of Defense. Standard protocol." Nadia nodded. "Of course." Malik stepped aside, radioed in her identification with a tone of absolute professionalism, offering neither favoritism nor distance. While he waited, He did not speak. He did not fill silence with commentary. He simply stood, the weight of leadership in his posture. Ramirez watched him like a student who had just seen the right way for the first time. Caldwell shifted, restless, his arrogance cracked, but still clinging to him like armor badly dented. The radio crackled back, confirmed. Lieutenant Nadia Jenkins, Naval Special Operations, active status, honorable record. Malik nodded, almost imperceptibly. Then he looked at Caldwell, and the street seemed to lean closer to hear. "You violated protocol," he said. "You escalated without cause, and your body cam was not activated at the start of the stop." Caldwell's face reddened, the humiliation closing around him like a vice. He started. But Malik cut in softly, firmly, with the weight of truth. "She followed the law. You did not." Ramirez looked down, shame settling in her chest. She had followed Caldwell because he was senior, because she was new, because she feared that questioning authority meant losing belonging. And now she saw what that cost. "Officer Caldwell," Malik continued, "you are suspended pending internal investigation. Officer Ramirez, you are temporarily removed from field duty pending review." Tiana's voice trembled as she whispered into the phone. "He's actually being held accountable. I've never seen that happen in real time." Caldwell took a step forward, anger boiling up from the wounded pride that had always driven him. "This is political. You're trying to." But Malik didn't let him finish. "Enough," he said again. "Simple, final, unshakable. Authority grounded in integrity is something unmistakable." Caldwell fell silent, not because he agreed, but because there was nowhere left for his power to go. Malik then turned back to Nadia. "Lieutenant," he said softly, "you're free to go." "I'm sorry this happened." Nadia studied him, her expression calm, unreadable, but something in her eyes softened. Only slightly. "Thank you, Sergeant," she said, and for the first time that day, there was no tension in her voice as she stepped back into her vehicle. Devin lowered his phone, his heart pounding with the understanding that he had just filmed something that would not stay on one street corner. Tiana already knew what she would post. Her voice, steady now, spoke into her camera. "This is going online. Right now. The world needs to see how this happened, how it started, and how it almost went wrong." The video would have 2 million views by morning. The city had not changed yet, but something had begun to move. And in Chicago, when the wind shifts, everyone feels it. The video reached the internet before Nadia even made it back to her aunt's house. Tiana posted it with no music, no commentary, no filters, just the raw moment as it happened, the kind of recording that carried its own meaning without needing to be explained. In the first hour, it hit 30,000 views. By noon, it crossed 300,000. By nightfall, it was already past 2 million. Comments poured in faster than anyone could read them, a flood of disbelief, anger, recognition, and pain from strangers across the country who had seen scenes like this too many times. She didn't fight. That officer was out of control. Why does this still keep happening? And then, "Who is she?" Devin had commented early, answering as if the city itself had chosen him to speak. "Her name is Nadia Jenkins. She's from here. She served. She's one of us." The words carried more weight than he understood. Across living rooms, break rooms, barbershops, and late-night phones glowing in dim bedrooms, the story took hold. Nadia did not watch the video at first. She came home with groceries and medication, walked softly into the house, and placed a gentle hand on her aunt's shoulder before saying anything. "You're back," Aunt Keisha breathed, relief filling her voice more than fear ever had. She did not ask about the encounter. She could read Nadia's face. She had known her since she was a child. She knew what quiet meant. Uncle Jamal stood behind them, hands on his hips, watching her with the worried patience of a man who had seen life hurt people he loved. "You all right?" he asked. It was not a casual question. It came from the marrow. Nadia nodded slowly, lowering herself onto the couch beside Keisha. "I'm all right," she said, and in one sense, she was in another. She was shaking deep inside where no one else could see. She did not tremble outwardly, but inside. Something unsettled had begun to stir. She had survived battlefields. She had survived loss, but being targeted at home, in the place that had shaped her, left a different kind of ache, a quiet one, a wound without blood. As evening settled, the doorbell rang. It was soft, hesitant, not urgent. When Nadia opened the door, Tiana stood on the porch, no phone in her hand, no camera raised, just a young woman with worry in her eyes. "I'm sorry to come by," she said quickly, "but I thought you should know what's happening." Nadia didn't speak at first. She simply stepped aside, inviting her in with a gesture. Tiana sat on the edge of the dining chair, hands folded, voice careful. "The video is everywhere. People are talking. News pages picked it up. Reporters are reaching out. And there's a protest forming outside the 7th District station. Folks want accountability. They want change." Nadia listened in silence. She had not asked for any of this. She had not wanted attention or recognition. She wanted to care for her aunt, to live quietly, to heal in private. But silence has a way of being interrupted by truth when the world is ready to listen. "Did you upload it?" Nadia asked, though she already knew. "Yes," Tiana said, her voice steady but sincere. "I didn't want what happened to be erased or twisted. The way these things usually go. I'm sorry if it brings you trouble, but I couldn't just watch and let it disappear." Nadia nodded, and the nod was not angry. It carried understanding. "You did what you felt was right," she said, "and the truth matters." Outside, the neighborhood had begun to buzz. People stood on porches talking quietly. Cars slowed at the corner, drivers shaking their heads in disbelief or frustration or weariness, the kind that sits in bones. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Caldwell sat alone in his apartment, blinds closed, a half-empty bottle on the table, replaying the video over and over again, watching the moment of his own loss of control. He tried to tell himself the camera had lied, that people didn't understand, that they were exaggerating, twisting, hunting him. But beneath the excuses was something deeper, something hollow and frightening, the realization that the world had seen him clearly, and clarity can be unbearable. Ramirez sat in her car outside her mother's home, crying quietly into her hands, overwhelmed by the weight of realizing how close she had come to becoming someone she swore she never would. She whispered to herself, "To no one. I should have said something sooner, words that many have said too late." At the 7th District station, owners of nearby shops, pastors, high schoolers, bus drivers, mothers with strollers, and retired men with weathered hands began to gather, holding homemade signs not of anger alone, but of exhaustion. "Enough. Respect us. We deserve better." It was not a riot. It was a plea. Captain Leroy Simmons called Nadia that night. "I saw the footage," he said softly. There was no need for explanation. "You holding together?" She closed her eyes, leaned her head back against the chair. "I'm balancing," she said. "Not falling, not steady, just balancing." Leroy exhaled on the other end of the line. "You don't have to carry this alone. If this becomes something bigger, I'll stand with you, whatever comes." She believed him. The clock on the living room wall ticked softly. Her aunt rested. Her uncle watched her with quiet concern. And Nadia realized something she had been avoiding since the moment the lights flashed behind her car. She could choose to walk away from this moment, or she could face it, And if she chose to face it, she would not be doing it for herself alone. She would be doing it for every person who never got the camera, the witness, the chance to be believed. The wind outside shifted, not weather, change, a kind that never stays small. The interrogation room was quiet, not the harsh silence of threat, but the heavy kind that comes after something irreversible has already happened. Detective Emily Chen placed a slim folder on the metal table, her movements precise, calm, and without judgment, as if she understood that truth revealed itself best in the absence of force. She had seen countless cases over her 20 years, but something about this one felt heavier, not because of the incident alone, but because of what it reflected. Patterns repeated, stories overlapping, wounds reopened. Caldwell sat first, arms crossed tightly, jaw clenched, trying to project the authority he once carried so easily, though now it felt like a uniform several sizes too big. Chen opened the folder, her voice even and steady. "Officer Caldwell, we're conducting a formal review of the traffic stop on 63rd. This conversation is recorded." Caldwell nodded stiffly but said nothing. Chen slid a printed document toward him. "This is your misconduct record. 11 previous complaints, 8 use-of-force allegations, 4 cases dismissed due to insufficient evidence, 3 quietly settled, 1 reprimand issued and buried." Caldwell stared at the page, but his eyes did not read it. Those were misunderstandings. He muttered. Chen did not argue. "This one is documented on 3 separate body cams and 6 civilian recordings." She said, "Your camera was off at the beginning of the stop." Again. Caldwell's throat tightened. He tried to speak, but excuses dissolved under the weight of evidence. In the hallway, Ramirez sat across from a closed door, hands gripping a styrofoam cup of lukewarm coffee she hadn't taken a single sip of. She replayed the stop in her mind. Not the actions themselves, but the moment she chose silence instead of stepping between harm and its target. Silence has echoes. It followed her now. Chen called her in next. Ramirez entered slowly, shoulders drawn inward, like she was bracing for something she believed she deserved. Chen looked at her, not with accusation, but with clarity. "Officer Ramirez, tell me what happened. Not the version that protects anyone. The truth." Ramirez swallowed hard. "I saw it happen," she said, voice trembling. "He escalated first. She followed instructions. She moved to protect herself. I froze. I was supposed to say something, and I didn't." Her words were raw, unpolished, heavy with regret. Chen nodded, writing nothing down. She didn't need to. "Do you regret your silence?" Ramirez closed her eyes. "Yes, I don't want to become someone who hurts people just because I'm scared to speak." For the first time that day, her voice steadied, softer but certain. "I want to make it right." Chen let the silence sit for a moment, not as punishment, but as acknowledgement. "Then this is the moment that will define you," she said simply. "Not what happened, but what you do next." Meanwhile, Nadia sat in a separate room with Malik nearby. Though he did not speak for her and did not need to, she was composed, hands folded loosely in her lap, posture upright but not tense, like someone who had learned long ago that the body should not give away fear even when the heart remembers it. Chen stepped inside, offered a respectful nod. "Lieutenant Jenkins, thank you for coming." Nadia nodded back. "I understand the process," she said. Her voice was warm but steady, the voice of someone who had spoken in briefing rooms where consequences were life and death. "I don't want special treatment, just fairness." Chen took a seat. "That's exactly what we're here to determine." There was no hostility between them, only clarity. Chen turned on the recorder. "Please describe the incident." The description came not as a performance, not sharpened by anger or blurred by emotion, but as fact. Nadia recounted each moment, each movement, each escalation, each restraint, the way someone would mark steps in training, not because she was detached, but because her mind had learned to file trauma neatly to survive it. When she described Caldwell's words, "People like you need to learn your place." Chen's pen paused for half a second. Not surprised? Saddened? When the account concluded, Chen said softly, "You demonstrated remarkable restraint." Nadia breathed slowly, eyes lowering just a degree. "I have seen what happens when restraint is lost," she said. "I did not want to hurt him. I just wanted to come home." Malik looked at her then, not as a supervisor, but as a man who understood something beyond the procedural. "You did everything right," he said gently. Nadia nodded once, though inside. The memory still flickered at the edges, a shadow she kept anchored beneath control. Chen finished the session, closed her folder, and stood. "The review will conclude soon," she said. "Whatever comes next, I want you to know. Your composure protected not just yourself, but everyone there." Nadia took a slow breath. "Then I'm grateful." Outside, Ramirez sat waiting. When Nadia stepped into the hallway, their eyes met, not as adversaries, not as victims and offenders, but as two women who had stood in a moment that tested them differently. Ramirez stood, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry. I should have spoken up." Nadia studied her, not with anger, but with a tired kind of empathy. "Then speak now," she said, "and mean it, and change what comes next." Ramirez nodded, tears unstated but present. Caldwell remained alone in the interrogation room, his silence no longer control but consequence. The investigation was not over, but its direction was clear, and outside the station, the crowd continued to grow, not loud, not violent, just present, waiting, watching, keeping the truth from disappearing. The wind had already begun to turn. 6 months later. The courtroom was full, not overflowing, not chaotic, but full in the way a room becomes when a city has been holding its breath for too long. People came quietly, teachers, veterans, nurses, teenagers with backpacks, mothers holding toddlers, old men leaning on canes, each one carrying their own memory of a moment in this city where power had been used the wrong way. Nadia sat at the plaintiff's table, calm, composed, her hands folded loosely, her posture straight, neither defensive nor proud. She did not come here to win something for herself. She came to tell the truth, across from her. Caldwell sat with a lawyer the union had provided, shoulders slumped in a suit that didn't fit the way his uniform once had. His face looked older than his 42 years, worn by months of suspension, therapy mandated by internal review, and the slow unraveling of a marriage that had been failing long before the traffic stop, but collapsed under public scrutiny. Ramirez sat behind her own counsel, not as a defendant, but as a witness, a role she had chosen after her apology letter was released publicly, a letter she had written slowly, carefully, painfully, naming not only her silence but the reasons behind it: fear of retaliation, fear of standing alone, fear of discovering she had become someone she did not recognize. Her testimony would matter, but not yet. Judge Monroe, a man with silver hair and a quiet voice, presided with the steadiness of someone who understood that trials are not about spectacle, they are about weight. The first witness was Tiana. She walked to the stand without makeup, without nerves, without the bravado her followers sometimes saw online. Her voice was steady. "I recorded it because I knew if I didn't, no one would believe what happened. I've seen this before. I've seen it too many times." She did not need to cry to be believed. Then Devin testified, his voice softer, a little shaky, but honest. She didn't attack him. She just moved. He kept grabbing her. "I've seen people get arrested for less. I didn't want this to be another story nobody listened to. His hands trembled, but the truth stood solid. Carlos took the stand, his voice strong, lined with years of watching the same pattern repeat. She was calm. He wasn't. That's all. Everybody saw it. The defense tried to suggest misinterpretation. The videos erased that argument quickly. The footage played without commentary, without slow motion, without dramatic music. Just what happened. A moment that should have been routine becoming something sharp and unnecessary. The courtroom was silent. Not tense. Not angry. Silent in the way people become when they already know the truth and are waiting for the system to admit it. Then it was Ramirez's turn. She walked to the stand slowly, hands clasped, breath controlled. She looked at Nadia before speaking. Not for approval, not for forgiveness, but for acknowledgement. I followed Officer Caldwell's lead. She said quietly, I shouldn't have. I saw what was happening. I knew it was wrong. I didn't say anything. I let silence do harm. Her voice wavered, but she did not stop. I don't want to be the kind of officer who causes harm because she is afraid. I am trying to learn. I am trying to be better. I am sorry. Nadia listened without softening, but without hardness either. She allowed the words to exist. Caldwell, when called to speak, avoided the stand until his attorney insisted. He walked slowly, as if each step required something he no longer had. He did not deny what happened. He did not apologize either. He spoke in circles about stress, long shifts, disrespect he believed he had endured on the job, and the fear he felt when someone didn't do what I told them. But fear spoken without ownership does not transform into truth. When asked if he believed Nadia was a threat, he hesitated too long. I didn't know, he finally muttered, and those 3 words landed like a closing door. He didn't know, because he never tried to know. When closing statements ended, the courtroom didn't buzz or murmur or shift. It simply waited. Judge Monroe delivered the ruling with the clarity of a man who understood the importance of the moment but refused to dress it in theatrics. The court finds in favor of Lieutenant Nadia Jenkins. The conduct demonstrated by Officer Caldwell was an unjustified escalation and a violation of civil rights. The department will issue a formal termination. Officer Caldwell is barred from future law enforcement employment in the state. Caldwell did not argue. He simply closed his eyes. Officer Ramirez, the judge continued, your cooperation and testimony reflect accountability. Your suspension stands. You will return to training under direct supervision and participate in community engagement programming. Ramirez nodded, tears sliding silently, but her breath steadier now. The courtroom exhaled. Not cheers, not applause, just a release of something held too long. After the ruling, Nadia stepped outside into the crisp afternoon. A quiet crowd waited, not shouting, not chanting, just present, witnesses to the truth. Reporters clustered forward, microphones extended. Lieutenant Jenkins, do you have a statement? Nadia took a slow breath. Her voice carried, not loud, but clear. I did not come home to fight a war. I came home to take care of family. What happened should not have happened to anyone. So I'm starting something. A program. A space for returning veterans and local youth to train, to heal, to lead. We will call it Windy City Warriors. The crowd listened. You can fight for this country overseas, she said, her voice firm but warm. But when you come home, you should not have to fight to exist. And the wind, cool and steady, moved through the city like a promise. The city did not change overnight, but change does not always begin loudly. Sometimes it starts like a shift in the air, a quiet turning of the wind that only those who have suffered through the storm can recognize. 6 months had passed since the ruling, and the protests had faded. Not because the anger was gone, but because the first part of justice had finally been spoken out loud. The 7th District now held mandatory body cam activation for every traffic stop. No exceptions, no delayed toggles, no gray areas. Officers sat through new training, not the kind filled with slogans and handouts, but real conversations led by community members who had been on the other side of the badge. Ramirez attended each session, taking notes, asking questions, teaching herself to dismantle instincts she had been rewarded for in silence. Some officers resisted, some rolled their eyes, but a seed was planted, and seeds do their work slowly. Caldwell left Chicago. There was no celebration in his fall, no joy in his unraveling. Tragedy and accountability sometimes exist together, and the city understood that both could be true. He found work in a warehouse outside Joliet, where no one spoke his name, where he lived quietly with the weight of what he could no longer ignore. And maybe, in that quiet, he would face himself, or maybe he wouldn't. Justice is not clean. It is simply necessary. Nadia, in the meantime, did not return to military service. She built something new instead. The Windy City Warriors program began in a converted recreation center near Halstead, the paint still peeling on the walls when she first stepped inside, but she saw possibility in its roughness. Veterans came first, men and women who carried unseen wounds. Some had night terrors. Some had silence where laughter used to be. Some had anger that didn't know where to go. Nadia greeted them with patience, not pity. The training was not violent. It was grounding. Breath, balance, awareness. Movement meant to return someone to their own body after trauma had pushed them out of it. Local youth came next. Teenagers who lived at the intersection of fear and survival every day, who had seen flashing lights more than textbooks, who learned young to hold their breath around authority. Nadia didn't lecture them. She gave them the same tools she had given her teammates overseas: how to stand without shrinking, how to breathe when panic begins, how to see a situation clearly before reacting, and in those shared spaces. Something rare occurred. Veterans and youth taught each other how to stay alive, not just physically, but emotionally. Tiana volunteered to handle outreach and digital fundraising. Devin became the unofficial Big Brother figure for the younger kids, bringing humor where heaviness sometimes tried to settle. Carlos helped maintain the space, fixing what broke, painting what needed color. And Sergeant Malik visited often, not as law enforcement, but as a man who understood the responsibility of being seen. One evening, after a long day of training, Nadia climbed the stairs to the building's flat rooftop, where a small garden planter now held her aunt's favorite flowers. Keisha had passed quietly 2 months earlier, at home, surrounded by voices she loved. The loss had been gentle, not easy, but gentle, and grief, when it is allowed to be shared, becomes something that does not crush, but softens. Nadia stood at the edge of the roof, overlooking the stretch of city below: brick, streetlights, faded murals, and the endless grid of Chicago blocks that held stories no history book could contain. She breathed in slowly, the cool evening air filling her lungs, steady and grounding. Uncle Jamal joined her a moment later, leaning on the railing beside her, hands tucked into his coat pockets. "She'd be proud of you," he said quietly. Nadia didn't respond right away. Her voice came only after a long, easy silence. "I hope so," she said. "I couldn't save her, but I could build something in her name." "You did more than that," he replied. "You changed something out there." Nadia looked out at the skyline, where the last gold of sunset gave way to deepening blue. Not enough. She murmured, "Not yet." Jamal smiled, a tired but real smile. "Change doesn't come like thunder. It comes like breathing. You just keep doing it, and one day you notice the world is different." A soft wind passed over the rooftop, cool and carrying the faint scent of smoke from someone grilling 3 blocks away. Laughter from a window open somewhere. The rustle of late leaves brushing concrete. It was a wind that moved north. The direction sailors used to say brought storms, and also clearing skies. Nadia closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. She was not the girl who had left this city. She was not only the soldier who had survived overseas. She was something in between, something new, something rebuilding. And the city, wounded but breathing, was rebuilding too. "Come on," she said to her uncle, her voice soft but steady. "It's time to go home." They walked down together, not away from the world, but deeper into it. And the wind continued to shift, gently, steadily, carrying with it the quiet beginning of a different future. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more meaningful stories. Thank you.